Welcome, Space Marines! Today, we are going to be covering the top 3 things I think this game needs to make this game as good as it can be sooner rather than later. If they wait too long to implement some of these changes, it could start hemorrhaging a lot of the player base that it gathered through its initial launch week, with hype from the 40k fandom, and the good word of mouth garnered so far. Let me preface this by saying so far, I'm still loving this game, albeit even with a couple of gripes that will be addressed in this video. And I have full faith that the development team is trying their best to push out the updates and content needed, but they just need a little bit more time to cook. The problem is a lot of people are impatient and it could have them moving on to other things, especially with the great lineup of games coming out next month if they don't put a pep in their step. Now, without further ado, let's address these top 3 things right now. Let's start with number 1 being the most important by giving a way for players to actually play the game consistently online, which is by fixing the servers and outright playability of the game. This is one of the most talked about points of the game by far on comment sections from their own Focus Together forums, Reddit, and all other spaces people gather online to talk about Space Marine 2. Since the game's launch, people have been having a serious problem actually connecting to the servers of the game for online matches, whether it be Operations Mode or Eternal War. And even when they can actually join lobbies and matches, they are then susceptible to being in a bugged lobby where they're infinitely queuing or having to back out of the game entirely to try matchmaking again. Don't even get me started on the black screen that I've occasionally experienced as well while just trying to launch a mode of the game from the battle barge. Personally, I've only had the occasional experience with these server and matchmaking issues, but they are apparent and are very annoying as it takes my Xbox Series X a while to boot the game back up and try to get back into the match or lobby that I was in with friends before the actual crash. But just because I don't experience it as frequently doesn't make it less annoying, nor does that escape the fact that there are people who bought the game that simply almost exclusively get this problem almost every time they try online options for the game. If I personally couldn't load up the game without getting some type of error or matchmaking problem, I would be livid. Paying $70+ in this economy to go through hoops and hurdles to catch a match would have me fuming over my purchase decision. As in my opinion, if you pay for a game and it's this expensive, the buyer has a right to play the full game, if not demand a refund. And is something I would genuinely consider if I myself was having these problems consistently. Thankfully, in my case, it's more rare that I actually go through these issues, but again, it doesn't mean others aren't being marred by this experience. And with these issues, this could drive those players to going to, like I stated earlier, refunding the game, or at the very least, not playing the game until a patch finally comes out, which recently they actually did release a patch and it fixed it for some people, but not all. Or they lose interest in the game altogether and move on to other games because, as I mentioned before as well, there are a lot of big games actually coming out in October. All of this together is a main reason why, in my humble opinion, this has to be the number 1 priority for the development team and why it's listed as my number 1 and things this game needs to change sooner rather than later. This was also basically confirmed in their more recent big FAQ that answered a lot of fans' questions. And if you're interested for more details on all of that was covered in that FAQ, I'll be linking this video on screen, which will be linked down below in the description if you're interested in that. Moving on to number 2, I think this game desperately needs an Apothecary class, or at the very least a class of that nature that's in the healing realm. Now, before I hear the argument of skill issue or I want the cool librarian or insert other class here, first let me explain. Across the board on all the modes, whether it be campaign, operations, or even Eternal War, one thing is consistent in the gameplay. Without the medipacks, which I'm pretty sure they are only available in the PvE modes, at least from the various matches of Eternal War that I've played, the only other way to get your HP back, again this being your HP, not your armor, is to get someone with an execution in the PvE modes or kill them outright mere seconds after initially taking damage. Sadly, when it comes to PvP, this doesn't even seem possible because I've been in countless skirmishes where I end up on top but just barely, but the only thing that recovers after 5 to 10 seconds is my shield and not my HP. Even if I finish that kill within seconds of taking damage, as firefights aren't really as long as I thought they would be in PvP, I still don't get any of my health back. This makes PvP severely punishing for getting into a fight of any kind, as even if you win, then you have to play extremely cautious either by being late to an already occurring fight or playing flanks to not take the brunt of the damage, as you just don't have the HP to do so anymore, especially with the surprising fast time to kill in the game. Not to mention, when it comes to the PvE side of things and when playing on higher difficulties, some players just straight up don't have the mechanics to perform an execution without taking more damage in return to actually benefit off of the seconds to get HP back off of executions, and metapacks get more and more sparing as you up the difficulty. And even if you're skilled enough or mechanically good enough to get executions to work in replenishing HP back, while you're in animations of executions or critical headshots after dodging or parrying, you're still able to get hit by various enemies in the fight while in the animation, potentially nullifying or getting rid of the HP or armor you just recovered through that execution. On top of that, during the big FAQ the developers released that we mentioned at the end of point 1, they addressed that they wouldn't be adding iframes to those executions or parry/dodge moments either. And then even if you yourself are able to capitalize on all the executions or headshots without getting hit, and you are able to mechanically keep your HP up, there is no guarantee that your teammates could do the same. Which in PvP isn't too much of a problem, but when it comes to operations, I don't think I really have to go in depth about how your teammates going down and down time after time, and now having the entire Tyranid Swarm being after you could be a problem. So in order to make the game more accessible across the board, and not only that, but also give some of the best players in the lobby a fighting chance in actually carrying a team, I think an Apothecary without question is the first class that should be coming to the game, especially by the time the new lethal mode and horde mode finally get introduced, as those are the times an Apothecary class would be, I'm sure, instrumental to take down the new highest difficulty in the game, and if difficulties are a thing in horde mode, definitely that game mode as well. Albeit, of course, designing a class from scratch and balancing them appropriately into the current state of the game will be a heavy task for the developers and will take time. But I think the sooner they get this fine-tuned and released, the better. As I've stated in earlier videos, I think the Apothecary class will undoubtedly be the first class they introduce to the game, and most likely will be coming by Season 2 in their roadmap when Lethal Mode releases. But hopefully that timeline won't be too late when it comes to bleeding the more casual or first-time Warhammer 40k players by then. Lastly, let's move on to point number 3, which is the last point of what I think the game needs sooner rather than later in my opinion, which is a heavy PvP refresh. Now let me preface this by saying I was not a fan of PvP when I initially played it in this game. I thought it was boring, it was too bare bones, and I felt like the outplay potential wasn't there. But the more I played and the more I got into my personal favorite class being tactical, the more the PvP mode grew on me. There actually is a ton of outplay potential depending on if you're eagle-eyed with the camouflage or have the grenade needed to take on a group of enemies or a heavy with a bubble shield. On top of that, I noticed that this game was a true team game and benefited from having numbers in fights more than anything. But solo battles were really fun, albeit rare. I've had countless times I've been at the top of the leaderboard with a great KD, but I never shook the feeling of the game being too bare bones. This game has two core mechanics we touched on earlier that aren't in PvP, being its executions and a healing mechanic. The maps are way too few in number, and the modes are fun, but need a slight bit more in variety. Personally, I think the most boring mode in this is the Team Deathmatch mode, Annihilation. Not only that, but it has a weird problem or bug in PvP that when you find a lobby, the mode sometimes, not all the times, will never change. So you'll be playing the same mode until you re-queue up for Eternal War completely. And the teams don't change, so your teammates will be the same until they leave or others join, whether that be for better or for worse. Again, this point in particular is touched on during the big FAQ, but was just mentioned to be looked into and fixed at a later patch. All this isn't even touching on people's complaints for certain classes and how they feel they need to be balanced for PvP, but that's its own can of worms. I know PvP was nowhere near the priority when making this game, but truly I think with a little bit of polish and a couple of changes and updates, this could be one of my favorite PvP modes to come out in a long time, at the very least for 2024. Adding something like a ranked mode to get continuous progress or a leaderboard of some sort to see where you stack compared to others would be great, and a true reason to grind out PvP would have people sticking around with the game much longer. Whether that be the aforementioned ranked play, or maybe exclusive skins or armor parts for reaching a certain rank. Something to keep the people engaged with the PvP I feel like would go a long way for the mode's longevity. Add a minimum of 2 more maps, a way to heal, some executions, a different mode, ranked play, and exclusive armor sets and gun camos, and I would be grinding PvP for days to come. Overall, that about wraps up the top 3 things I think this game personally needs sooner rather than later to keep this game thriving. We touched on performance and overall playability of the game, a healing class to be introduced to make things feel a little bit more accessible, and finally, a refresh of the PvP formula, with hopefully them focusing on the first thing and getting that squared away so people could at least enjoy what we have now for what it is, and enjoying the experience that Space Marine 2 has to offer. Thankfully, they recently released a patch addressing this issue in particular, but some people are still having problems with server connectivity. Let me know what you guys think on all these points in the comment section down below, and if you have anything you would like to see added to the game, drop that down there as well. Thank you guys for making it to the end of the video. If you enjoyed or found it entertaining, make sure to scroll down and hit that like button and make it glow so we can reach our like goal of 25 likes for this video. While you're down there, consider subscribing as we'll be covering Space Marine 2 as updates come out, other AAA games throughout the year, hilarious content, and more. As always, your support through your viewership, liking, and subscribing is always greatly appreciated and helps me out tremendously against the tyrannid threat that is the YouTube algorithm. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to catch you guys next time. Peace!